My name is Nancy Catherine Fulford. I'm a prenatal educator, and I'm a mother and a grandmother. And I care passionately about the birthing process because I think it's essential to the wellness of women and families and therefore the world. I'm speaking out because I care. I think that's why people speak out in general, is when they care about something. And um, it's very easy to just kind of go with the flow of what your society has set out in front of you. And sometimes you have really strong intuitions about when you need to take a left turn from the main flow. And as quite a young woman, I had a very strong intuition that I needed to look carefully at the whole birthing process, and I began reading and asking questions and built relationships with midwives when I became pregnant with my first child. And that was a very difficult situation because I was a young woman at school. I had planned a career, and I'd made a conscious choice to have this baby adopted. And everybody wanted me to forget that baby even existed, even from the moment of conception. And I knew in my heart that was wrong, and that's really when I began on the path of looking into what it meant to hold a child, in your womb and look after it. And it became immediately evident to me that that baby needed to have the best time possible. And I think perhaps I had a particular insight because I had made the choice to adopt, so I knew I had a finite amount of time. And I think sometimes people think, oh well, when the baby comes, then we'll talk to it, then we'll look at it, then the baby will be part of our family. But I knew that I had 9 months to be a family with my daughter. So I poured a lot of love into her and spoke to her and took her on trips. We went to hear Bob Marley together, which she now thanks me for. We went down to the river and listened to the water. I had a real strong sense that the elemental world around me would come into her too, and so being in nature I knew was really important. And I was lucky because I had some great teachers, and perhaps just the benefit of some trials and tribulations in my life that kind of maybe opened my eyes to needing to really search. But a lot of young women don't have that. A lot of even very mature women don't have that impetus or that support to look. And I think that's why it is now vital that we begin to talk in our society about the importance of the life of the unborn child. And to welcome those beings into our families from the moment they are conceived. Because, as the branch, as the twig bends, so grows the branch. And I think that is true also with the baby. And once upon a time we thought, when they're first born, they can't see anything, they can't feel anything. They're really just going to be this, this doll that cries for who knows how long. Eventually they'll become human. I remember as a child being told that story and thinking, well, when do we know when they're real? And of course this is false. Of course, they are beings from the moment of conception. And it almost, when I think of it now, it's almost kind of like the unborn child is sort of like the elephant in the room in a way. There we all are. And I think a lot of us actually have that intuition that there's the baby, and we smile and we might look at the mother for a moment, but then we think that's all that's socially acceptable. To do anything else would be to make an inappropriate fuss or to be weird or hippie or something. And that is boxing us in to behaving in human, compassionate ways to those women and those children. And I think we have to begin to look at that and say it's time for a new view on what these, the importance of the life of these children as they are growing within their mothers. And that, of course, means esteeming the mothers who are with these babies, because how a mother feels, and I knew that. I knew when I carried my first child, and there was crisis, and there was sadness around my situation. I knew that was coming to her, and it's interesting. I was very young, but when there was a sadness around, some choices her dad made, I just sat there and held her and apologized to her for and cried, but apologizing to her for it seemed like hours, because I knew that the pain that I was coming to her, So I think it's interesting. You know, I was very young, and I think sometimes in that youthful state, we are actually quite in touch with, you know, especially when we're sent big things like, you know, being a mother, than when we are sort of more educated and we've been taught about how things should go and what we should do and stuff. So, you know, and I carried that forward into the birth of the growing of the two children that I had and mothered, and had a really conscious time, and I know that had a really positive impact, and we had beautiful births, and you know, but even for me, I know there was a limit to how much energy and attention and love I gave that child, because there were the societal norms around, you know, that would be a bit weird or something, and it's, as I said earlier, it's time for that to be pushed to one side, and for us to go, where's that baby? Where's that pregnant baby? Well, you know, let's just send the love there and support the mom by making her, you know, the important being that she is. Something I learned when I was investigating the whole prenatal thing, because I worked as a prenatal educator, and as well as having had the experience of being a mom, and what I learned is that in many cultures there's such a thing as a medulla, and there's also a very sacred time after the birth of a baby, often sort of 6 weeks, when the mother is just looked after. You know, it's her role to be with the baby and nurse the baby, and that's about it. You know, and everyone feeds her and loves her. And it is a great tragedy in the Western world that mothers now have sort of been dropped. And you know, I guess it has definitely improved, but it's all sort of on part of the continuum. That sort of thing that a woman gives birth, and she gets a couple of attention for a few days from the greater community, and then maybe her partner takes a week off work, and then she's left. You know, and it was one of the most isolating experiences of my life, to be left at home with children. You know, and if we want to shift that, you know, we have to roll it right back to how we begin to treat her when she is with child, you know, so that it's just all part of the flow, that we go, this is sacred time, and it's so important, and what this woman eats, and her, you know, the energetic field around her, you know, which we contribute to with our love or our anger or whatever we're bringing into her sphere, is so important. And so, you know, so it must be too in this very important early stage of a mother being with her baby and nursing her baby and so on. So yeah, it's part of the big picture of bringing happy, healthy children into the world, and by golly, we need them, because the world is facing a lot of crises. And, you know, it's too late for fixing a lot of things down there, but we can invest in bringing forward these, you know, more peaceful people who feel nurtured and loved from conception. Yes, and I know, you know, from working with many different women, that they're hungry. They're hungry for support from their communities, and we need to begin normalizing the fact that, you know, she is the Madonna in this state and deserves special treatment. And I think sometimes we have confused in that whole thing of, you know, we want gender equity, but we want, so that's different than equality. We want everybody to be treated well, is what we want, and to treat women special in the way that they are given special nurturing, whatever, is not, you know, the door, things are physically made easier for them. They're not expected to lift anything or to do hard labor. You know, that's not defying, you know, gender issues. That's just sensible. Yeah. So when I think about young women and what they're equipped with when they head into motherhood, I feel concerned about that, and I think education has to be a huge component of this, and that needs to begin with young women and young men, because I know I've spoken mostly about young women and myself as a young woman, my experience, and women in general, but of course, in order for women to have the choice to nurture their child and to be loving in that way to their child, they need support from the men around them, you know. And for this, I mean, whatever we teach to young women, at the same moment we need to be teaching it to young men, or else we're telling them it's not really that important. Because what we value, we put energy towards. No energy, no value. So until we equally say to young men and young women, this is important, and they hear the lesson together, then women will feel empowered and strong enough to be forthright and assertive and say, no, I need this space to be a loving space. That behavior is not acceptable. Well, unless a young man has also heard that there are very big consequences to behavior that is different than that, then why should he buy into it, Because he needs to know he's investing in the future of his family, in the future of our culture and society. So, yeah, the message needs to be carried equally forward to young men and young women. That's something I feel really passionate about. The Global Prenatal Initiative is making this really important issue a focus. It needs our support. It's, distilling a lot of really important information that's been around for a long time and bringing it together into an initiative that's offering a way forward that can begin to redress some of these patterns that we have in our culture of just not really understanding the importance and the honoring needed of a baby when it's conceived and growing. And its journey out into the world is safe, wholesome, emotionally supportive birth, a postnatal period that is loving and enveloping of the nursing couple and the whole family, and seeing that as a really vital thing. I guess, Global Prenatal Initiative is creating an opportunity for us to turn towards this, and that's something we really need to value. We have to look around our culture and say, what do we value? What are we putting attention towards? And in the balance of things, does that make sense for our future? And I think that's probably the first conversation you have to have with yourself. What am I valuing? What choices am I making in my life, what I do with my time and my energy to speak about what I think is important? And does that make sense, for my family, my community, the world I want for tomorrow? So you might need to carve some space because, this is what needs to happen, I believe. And, I bring forward the experience of a woman who had babies in different contexts and worked with women in different cultures around prenatal education. I've been in third world situations and watched the nurturing that happens in those families and how they still understand. And once when I was in Fiji and staying with a family, and the woman had given birth, and she stayed on one bed in the middle of the house. She was that important. She was moved into the middle of the house. She was not isolated. She was adored. And there she and the baby were. And people came to her and loved her and looked after her for 6 weeks. And it was kind of like she wasn't supposed to put her feet on the ground barely for that time. So we need to bring that into, I want that for my daughter and my granddaughter. It needs to be different. So, and Global Prenatal Initiative, as far as I can see, is offering us a way forward to make a mind shift. And that's what we need, a mind shift. And that needs to come from the heart.